whatever it may be, whether it's a secular life or whether it's, God himself. That's what we do as architects, as engineers, as builders. And so that's why Michael brought me out here today. Can everybody still hear me?
Yes.
All right, good. I want to make sure that I get it across without the microphone. So I'll start. It's not a half hour, I promise. When Michael Blihash asked me to present my thoughts on how the Revolutionary War hero Tadeusz Kosciuszko would react to America today, what I expected to be a relatively simple task became more of a reflection on what we are doing well and what we are failing to do. Initially, my optimistic spirit brought to mind the way that the man would look up, amazed at the lofty achievements in engineering and architecture at the Comcast Tower, reaching to the sky in so much steel and tempered glass. He would stand on the banks of the Delaware and look on in awe at our infrastructure as automobiles zipped across the Ben Franklin Bridge, named for his sponsor and friend. I thought about how proud Tadeusz would be to learn about how an elected man, born in a one-room log cabin on a small farm in Kentucky, abolished slavery at a time when our Union was in its most delicate condition since his days defending the Constitution that inspired Poland's own. He would be excited to learn of the continuous strides taken over 100 years later to grant all citizens an equal share in the rights granted to us in that Constitution, no matter the sex, color, creed, or orientation. Tadeusz would also be glad to know that the men and women of the American military continue to fight for the democratic rights of other peoples and other nations, risking their lives for the freedom of strangers. He would be thrilled to see how many people attend institutions of higher learning and how many people come from abroad to join us in our university classrooms. Above all things, Tadeusz would wonder at the explosion of the digital infrastructure that connects us as world citizens to one another. The information, the knowledge available to us each day via online search engines is astronomical. From the moon landings and the Voyager missions of Copernicus's dreams to the exploration of the minute world of radiation that Marie Curie pioneered and everything in between. Kosciuszko, however, strikes me as a realist, a man who would never accept the first, simplest, or superficial explanation or solution. At the top of those shimmering towers are the offices of the executives who undermined our economy in recent decades by sending American manufacturing and production jobs overseas. Elements of our infrastructure are crumbling due to neglect and lack of maintenance. Securing funds for our local roads was one of the primary responsibilities of our elected officials, and now the men and women at the highest levels of government have become interested only in their own tenuous understanding of the issues that really matter and on their position, which they doggedly maintain by stonewalling any possibility of consensus and spewing divisive rhetoric to undermine the inherent unity of the states. Imagine the great military engineer's frustration at the lack of services available to returning veterans and the lack of civilian employment available for those who bravely served our country. Kosciuszko, a man who left his wealth in trust for securing the release and education of slaves. The most marginalized members of society at the time would be disturbed at the state of many of our public schools in this country and by the lack of commitment of many of our policymakers to the funding of public education, while they exuberantly facilitate the cycle of incarceration of criminals who have become that way because of a lack of education. Kosciuszko knew over 200 years ago what we, as a culture, have yet failed to learn, that education is paramount in the generation of a great and noble society. Whether it be the pursuit of engineering and architecture, or the pursuit of woodworking and machining, a trade, he would insist that we learn. He would hold each of us responsible for where our nation falls in the international rankings of production, health, education, and general well-being. He would implore us to support the unity and the generous spirit of America and to appreciate progress and consensus by shunning fear and closed-mindedness. Tadeusz's criticisms would eventually soften. He would manage to see how great our society stands to make itself in these crucial years of its existence as we are faced with the great challenges of the day. After all, we are a resilient group, an industrious group, with a compassion which has preserved the world at large from tyranny and terror for decades upon decades. He would read through the latest version of our great Constitution, which has evolved into a document which truly protects the rights of every citizen. He would grasp our sense of commitment to this ideal as it is manifested in the fact that, all politics aside, a man of color now holds the office that an owner of slaves held first. For that, for us, Tadeusz Kosciuszko would have smiled.
Very nice.